Hello, everyone. It's my great honor to welcome you to this global event on World Autism Awareness Day, hosted by the Institute of Neurodiversity, ION. I'm Charlotte Valeur, the Global Chair of the Institute of Neurodiversity, which we call ION. Since our inception in 2021, ION has grown into a truly global organization with over 30,000 members and supporters across more than 40 countries, and still growing. Our mission is to accelerate the creation of a world where neurominority people are understood, accepted, and appreciated. We're building a worldwide community that believes in the neurodiversity paradigm and, in addition, work to offer free resources and accessible content for everyone, wherever they are. This event reflects our values and our vision. We have representation from every region of the world in this event, and we worked hard to ensure balance across neurotypes and intersectional identities because inclusion must mean everyone, not just some. Having a voice is vital. Without it, we cannot build agency, we cannot drive change, and we certainly cannot rewrite the narrative around autistic people and other neurominorities. ION is here to amplify the voice of all of you. The Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, from the UN, offer a powerful framework for reimagining a better world. That's why we've woven them throughout this event, using them to highlight how neurodiversity and autism connect to global progress, equity, and justice. I want to say a huge thank you to all our incredible volunteers who have worked tirelessly to bring this event to life, and to all the participants joining us from across the globe. Your energy, experience, and insights are what makes this event truly special. Together, we're not just raising awareness, we are building understanding, forging a solidarity, and shaping the future for all of us. To all of you who are watching from around the world, please do help us cascade this event in all your networks so we can amplify the message of our delegates and increase awareness, acceptance, and appreciation of autistic people. And now I want to pass over to the UN to share a few words. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Maher Nasser. I am with the United Nations Department of Global Communications. I am very pleased to join you for this annual observance of World Autism Awareness Day. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our partners at the Institute of Neurodiversity, or ION. ION has a formal association with our department as an NGO, and we greatly appreciate all of the meaningful work that you do year-round and for convening this important event today, which we are delighted to be supporting. The focus of this year's event is the intersection of neurodiversity, specifically autism, and the Sustainable Development Goals, otherwise known as the SDGs. The clock is ticking, and we are now just 5 years away from the deadline of 2030, by which the SDGs were to be achieved, and yet there is still so much to be done. Since world leaders adopted the 17 goals in 2015, they have been our shared blueprint for achieving peace and prosperity for both people and the planet. And they're interconnected. Eradicating poverty must go hand in hand with improving health and access to education, reducing inequalities and strengthening economic growth, while also tackling climate change and preserving the environment. Without one, you cannot have the others. They are interconnected and they support each other. It is also important to emphasize, especially for the purpose of today's event, that inclusion is at the core of the SDGs. When world leaders adopted the SDGs, they pledged to leave no one behind. What does leave no one behind mean? You may ask. It means that implementation of the SDGs must reach all segments of society, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, class, religion, and disability, among other factors. It means that we must overcome the discrimination that marginalizes and excludes certain groups and communities, including, in many places around the world, autistic people, and be inclusive of all if we are to achieve the SDGs. And it also means that the neurodiverse community, along with all other segments of society, rightfully deserves a seat at the table on decision making in matters that affect their lives, including on the SDGs. So the leave no one behind principle is crucial to the achievement of the SDGs. And it follows that the full participation of autistic and neurodiverse people in society is equally essential to advancing the SDGs. This core principle goes hand in hand with the fundamental rights enshrined in the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, the foundational document on disability rights that guides us today. I'm excited to hear what our contributors today, from global experts and policymakers to advocates and autistic individuals, have to say about what we can do to help to create the world that we want, a world that is truly inclusive of autistic people. Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. I'm Charlotte Wøller. I'm moderating this exciting first session in the World Autism Awareness Day called Autism and the UN SDGs, a Global Perspective. We have some great panelists from around the world who will introduce themselves after my brief introduction here. The theme is to explore how autism intersects with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how different countries are incorporating neurodiversity into their efforts to achieve these goals. And we'll hear from the different panelists from different parts of the world on this. And thank you for being here, Rashida. Would you mind introducing yourself to the participants, please?
Thank you for having me. My name is Rashida Namalondo, and I am an actress and applied theatre practitioner based in Uganda. I am the founder of the Sophie Monica Institute, where we try to increase access and inclusion and participation in the arts for marginalized communities in Uganda. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. And over to Minaj, if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Hi there. My name is Minhaj, and I am CEO of a company called SiteUp, where I focus on leveraging data and psychological insights to drive meaningful change. I am an individual with Asperger's, which means I experience the world in a very unique way, often with deep focus, strong passions, and a different approach to social interactions. My interest in autism comes from both personal experience and a desire to understand and support others on the spectrum. I enjoy learning about the diverse ways autistic minds work, advocating for acceptance, and helping create a world where neurodivergent people feel valued and understood.
Danielle, would you please introduce yourself to the delegates?
Sure, happy to do that. My name is Danielle Kale-Gray. I am a journalist with Australia's Broadcasting Corporation, which is our public broadcaster. I self-identify as autistic and I am diagnosed as dyslexic and ADHD, and I am a mum to 2 autistic kids as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. If I can pass it over to panelist Tony, would you start by introducing yourself briefly, please?
Yeah, I'm Tony Fish. Like, I suppose, so many neurominorities, I don't really have a career. I have a portfolio. I've built businesses, I've sold businesses, I've invested in businesses, and I'm also a local handyman. So I actually have a white van. I go out and do things like plumbing. So I have an incredibly diverse set of things that get me excited and out of bed every morning.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much. And Alan, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. I speak slowly because English is not my native language. My native language is Argentino, Spanish, and I'm from Argentina. I live in Buenos Aires, and it's kind of an effort to talk in a different language that is not your native language, because you want to make yourself understand by other people.
Yeah.
And related to autism, to speak in another language, it's a kind of masking. I do masking in my life to work to adapt myself to the neurotypical rules. And I am a writer, and I publish myself a lot of books, essays, and fictions. I am a father, I am a husband, and I do a lot of things, a lot of things.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you. And Kim, over to you.
Thanks, Charlotte. Hi, everyone. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. I'm Kim Shaw from Canada. I work as a consultant in the financial services sector and lead the Canadian chapter of the Institute of Neurodiversity, also known as ION. A few years ago, I underwent a cognitive assessment that revealed I have ADHD and dyslexia, which launched my journey towards understanding and accepting these neurological differences. Since then, I've been advocating for neurodiversity and systems change to improve the lives of individuals who think and perceive the world differently. There are significant overlapping traits of ADHD and autism, which make my work in neurodiversity aligned with the autistic advocacy, such as the experience of variation in cognition and sensory processing, for example, aspects related to memory and hyperfocusing. So as a leader in the neurodiversity advocacy, I aim to inspire hope by showcasing the potential of neurodistinct professionals and encouraging others to pursue leadership roles that can positively impact society. I too am a mother of two dyslexic, beautiful daughters, and I want to change the world for them.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Kim. Well said, all of you, and I'm delighted to have you here. So we're going to move over to questions, and I'll just read out the question and then ask one of you to answer them. So we'll go straight to one of the questions for you, Rashida. This is: what are the biggest challenges in ensuring that autistic individuals benefit from SDG initiatives, particularly in low-income or underserved regions?
Thank you for the question. So, to answer this question, I want to draw onto a case study in Uganda, or at least the situation in Uganda, which I could be a little more familiar with than the global one. So, in Uganda, despite all the initiatives, at least by volunteers and voluntary organizations to raise awareness on autism, it is still there's still a lot of stigma and a general lack of understanding. And so this lack of awareness has two issues. One, we do have parents and caregivers who are hiding away their children, their sisters, and in their houses, and are not allowing them to access, the public places or basic services. And a few of those people who are allowing the children, the caregivers, for example, children's sisters, brothers, to access school or public places, there's also still poor infrastructure, for example, for that kind of thing. If you've been in Uganda, it's extremely noisy. And so there's just like that lack of infrastructure. And it's also very cost effective. For example, if you look at our special education that has been put in place by the government, which is one of the initiatives to increase access to education. If you try to go to a private school, it's very expensive. And if you try to go to a government school, it is quite like overstaffed. So there's just so many people, and there's no attention given. So there's all that kind of crisis of the services, like poor services and poor attention given specifically for people who are autistic to access the services. So that could be one of the challenges.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that. That's really good insight, and it's so important that we hear from around the world what we are seeing in all the different countries, so we can maybe try to build on a global advocacy on a few points, like 2 or 3 points that will make a real difference. We're now moving on to a question about SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. And the question is, how can global healthcare systems be improved to better support autistic individuals, including non-speaking and high support needs individuals? Daniela, I would like to ask you around this. It aims for universal healthcare access.
Sure. Well, one of the ways in which global healthcare systems can improve is when voters demand it. And the reason that I bring this up is that autistic needs are forming part of Australia's voting this year in the election. So as a country,
Oh, wow.
Australia need to go to the polls before or on the 17th of May. The election hasn't been called, but the parties are starting to announce their platforms. The Green Party has announced that they would be going to the election on a promise of having all autism and ADHD diagnoses fully funded by Medicare, which is Australia's main healthcare systems.
Wow.
And this is important for a couple of reasons. So it's important because we know that this will be the first election where millennials and Gen Zs outnumber baby boomers, and that these are voters that are more interested in issues or values. So it's important for that. But it's also important because we have the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is how most autistic Australians, particularly those with complex or higher support needs, access supports because of the costs that are involved.
Yeah.
And so having a diagnosis that's already funded would actually help some of those individuals potentially access more care, because we know that those with higher support needs are almost automatically accepted onto the scheme, and there has been talk about limiting the scheme. So I think it's important for that. And the other reason that I think it matters is that it shows that political parties put forward things that are popular. And because we have to vote in our country and we go take our citizens to court if they don't vote, having autistic needs on an election platform is an important way to show that this is actually something that matters to everyday voters.
Absolutely. That was really great input to have from Australia that other countries can learn from, which is the whole reason for us to try to come together and see what goes on in other places. I'll now move on to question around SDG 4, which is quality education. Quality education calls for inclusive and equitable education. So the question is, what are some of the best international practices that you know of in making schools and universities more accessible for autistic students?
Thank you so much for asking this question. I believe that improving global healthcare systems to better support autistic individuals, including non-speaking and high support needs individuals, requires a multifaceted approach. First, healthcare providers must receive specialized training to understand autism spectrum disorder and what it is, and its diverse presentations, ensuring respectful, patient-centered care. This includes recognizing communication differences and utilizing alternative communication methods such as AAC, which is a short for augmentative and alternative communication devices for non-speaking individuals. So that's one category. And the other is that healthcare systems should prioritize accessibility by offering sensory-friendly environments, flexible scheduling, and longer appointment times to reduce stress and accommodate individual needs. I'd also like to emphasize that integrating multidisciplinary care teams, including speech therapists, occupational therapists, and behavioral therapists and specialists, can provide holistic support tailored to high support needs individuals. And finally, policies must promote equity by ensuring affordable, universal access to diagnostic services, therapies, and assistive technologies. Collaboration with autistic communities to co-design services and policies is essential to address systematic barriers and create inclusive healthcare systems that truly support the well-being of all autistic individuals.
Minhaj, those were very wise words that everybody can learn a lot from. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to ask you that question as well.
Well, there's a couple of things that have happened in Australia that I think might be interesting here for people to consider. One is that there's a project currently underway at Melbourne University that's led by neurodivergent staff to ask what staff from neurominorities, but also students, what they need and what's currently missing from the ways university operates. And that's gaining a lot of interest from other universities here in Australia, but also overseas. The other interesting development is that there is a lot of funding for different practices for autistic students in particular in South Australia. So 2 years ago, when the state had their election, they changed from a Liberal government to a Labor government. And part of Labor's platform was somewhere between $16 and $18 million for education for autistic students. And they have created a Ministry of Autism. And as part of that, and that goes across education, employment, healthcare, etc. But part of that is a promise to put an autism inclusion teacher in every public primary and high school. And they've done it mostly in the primary schools, and they're now doing a trial of 3 different models for how to do it in high schools. And the role of an autism inclusion teacher is not to teach the students, but it is to build the capacity in the teachers to work out how to help students and what it is that they need every day in their classrooms. Because what they have worked out based on the numbers is that there's at least one autistic student in every single classroom in South Australia in public education. So I think these sorts of policies are really interesting because they show that, again, it's voters that are demanding this of their governments, and that parties are potentially wanting to talk about how important this is rather than discussing the needs of students as a drain on the budget. It's the needs of the students as a way to attract votes. And I think that's an interesting dynamic.
It certainly is, and that's a great initiative. In one of the other World Autism Awareness Days, we had calls for having minimum 20% neurominority teachers in all schools, because we know that all classrooms are neurodiverse. It has all different neurotypes within the classroom, and that has been identified, at least for autism in Australia, which is a great step in the right direction. I would hope that those teachers would be neurominority teachers then that deeply understands what it means to be of a different neurotype. So, but that might not be the case, but that's something to maybe push for as well. Thank you for that great input. That's fantastic.
My pleasure.
We have a question around the SDG 8, which is decent work and economic growth. So it highlights the importance of inclusive employment. The question is, what policies or incentives have been effective in increasing job opportunities for autistic individuals worldwide? If you will start with that, Tony, please.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. From my perspective, I suppose there's a number of activities that have gone on, which I'm sure the others may expand on who answer the same thing, which is there are a series of supported employment programs which provide on-the-job coaching specifically around autism, and such as Project Search, which has worked in the UK and across the US. And apparently, and obviously I don't actually have access to the data, but they claim employment rates are 60-70% for autistic participants. I'd love to test it to understand that it's true, because I'm a deep data person. I haven't had access to the data, so I will just do what they claim to represent it. Then you can move to the specialist programs such as Microsoft, SAP, who have specific autism at work programs. I know that Dell and Ford have also been working on this. So have people like JP Morgan Chase. And that's great, because they're actually specifically trying to help people who have a diagnosis within their programs to get employment, and actually helping them in the employment process, which is massive. The thing that I think is missing in so many countries, the one exception being Australia at the moment, which has the disability employment, which is actually to offer financial incentives to those who are going to recruit across the disability range. It's one that a number of countries are looking at, but we're still waiting to see them actually implement it. And I think in the current global climate, it's going to be very difficult for a number of governments to implement it. We've got huge amount of education and training programs, and I'm going to run out of time, but Ireland's ability program is probably a leading light in that one. I think there's great opportunities to align to the SDG. There's great initiatives. There's just not enough of them. Would be my only thought.
Thank you so much for that, Tony. And Alan, what do you think about this one as well?
Thank you very much. Despite I work as a freelance writer, my fixed income is as an employee at the National Disability Agency of Argentina. So I can say that in my work, reasonable accommodations guaranteed by the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities have been made for autistic people with disabilities, including myself. My country, Argentina, has a 4% employment quota law to guarantee the employment of people with disabilities, including autistic people with disabilities, in the state institutions. I also publish and sell my books independently because I have not yet had opportunities as a writer in the publishing industry. I think everything comes later to me than to non-autistic people of my age because I spent too much of my life in different therapies for my mental health. I teach also behavioral finance and I make my classes accessible to autistic people because I believe that many autistic people could work in the financial industry doing short-term trading. Trading could be used to create investment cooperatives for autistic people. Some organizations related to business spread the idea that hiring autistic people can give a company a competitive advantage. I think this is a good idea, but it requires awareness campaigns about autism as a neurotype rather than a condition or a disorder. In relation to personal selection process, I think it is important in a job interview to anticipate to an autistic person how long the interview will last, how the place will be where he or she will have to go, what the questions will be about, and how many people will participate in the interview. To put in short words, I think we are in a shift paradigm.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I agree with all of that, definitely. And it's some great examples that you gave there. Thank you so much. So for Kim, I'm going to ask you, how can international collaboration and knowledge sharing help bridge the gap in autism research, advocacy, and policy implementation across different countries?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Charlotte. Working together globally and sharing knowledge offers enormous potential for improving autism research, advocacy, and policy across different countries. A great starting point would be working with organizations like the Institute of Neurodiversity, which is already networked globally with country chapters to foster collaboration and knowledge sharing among regional members. International collaboration and knowledge sharing are mechanisms for 1, collective problem solving, 2, innovation, 3, cooperation, and 4, community. Let me expand by what I mean by these mechanisms. First, collective problem solving. By sharing the lived experiences of neurominorities, cross-cultural insights, and different perspectives across the various socioeconomic regions, we can develop creative approaches to support research, advocacy, and policy for autistic and neurodiversity inclusion, where such activities are underdeveloped. 2, innovation. This phenomenon occurs when organizations are inclusive and led by neurominority or neurodistinct individuals. These groups bring a variety of thinking styles, including creative, divergent, nonlinear, and paradoxical approaches. By expanding collaboration and leveraging each other's cognitive diversity, across borders, we can effectively achieve common goals that support research, advocacy, and policy on a global scale. 3, cooperation. Engaging with diverse stakeholders, including autistic individuals and families from various regional and cultural backgrounds, enhances participation and fosters social cohesion globally. Both are essential for building trust in today's complex and uncertain world, which is crucial in research, advocacy, and policy outcomes for autistic inclusion. And lastly, 4, community. It is the cornerstone of social movements driven by people for the benefit of others. Building global communities is essential for humanity's survival and prosperity in the age of artificial intelligence and digital economy. Connections formed within these global communities establish a foundation for building human and social capital that supports research, advocacy, and policy development, autism, and neurodiversity. These 4 key, I would say, crucial aspects are the underpinnings of international collaboration and knowledge sharing. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kim. Communities is what we are all about at ION. I was thinking of a world where you have a mesh of networks of neurominority individuals and our allies coming together and supporting each other. We're on the road to that, and when we have more of that, I think it will be greater for a lot of us. Now, Tony, your comment on the same question, please.
Well, first of all, I want to support Kim and what you just said as well, Charlotte, which is the amplifying autistic voices globally through international self-advocacy networks such as ION. Absolutely an underpinning. So brilliantly points well made. I suppose a different perspective would be that we really haven't got standardization and data sharing together around autism globally. We haven't got common definitions, not only common definitions which people jump to, it's actually the ontology of the data, the structure of the data. And because we don't have the same ontologies, when we try to combine them through a systematic study, we can't, because actually we're using different data sets. We get very confused ways through it. So we need to create a data standard which allows us to have the shared view, which would allow us to do global and international research. The second part of that then comes down to this subtlety of the cross-cultural variation, which we really haven't got to grips with. And part of that comes through one of probably your other questions to other panelists around food and how food absolutely changes who we are and what we do. And it's not actually changing who we are and what we do. It's actually the way it manifests itself. So we have to look at traits differently through different lenses, and we haven't got that level of complexity within the data set, so we carry on missing, and therefore we find individuals are either overlooked or preferenced, which is creating lots of social issues within. The next part I think that we've got to consider is how we do policy globally. And we have global international companies, we have global supply chains, yet we completely fail when it comes to policy at a global level to deal with any level of diversity in the way that we think. The last thing I'd probably come back to is just reiterating where we started from on what you said, Charlotte, and what you've said, Kim, which is we have to amplify the voices by being global advocacy networks. And this sort of discussion is how we start it. And it's finding people who want to come and go, do you know what? I'm really interested in data. I want to pick that up and run with it, because that's the people we need.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we will very happily set up a committee globally that can do that. With the people who's interested. So anyone listening in, do contact us if something like that would be of interest to you. Now, for you, Alan, the next question. How do we ensure that autism advocacy efforts on a global scale remain inclusive and culturally sensitive, addressing the diverse needs and perspectives of autistic individuals in different regions?
It's difficult to answer because I don't see the future yet, but I'm working on this. I'm working on my visions, with my visions and the voices I hear. I think that autism is part of mad cultures. and the international autism community is transforming society's representations of autism. When we talk about math cultures, we are not only talking about the importance of arts in cultures, but also about the history of the autistic community, their education, and their own ways of expressing themselves. I think that the social imaginary about autistic people is changing, but we have to recognize that there still are tensions, conflicts. For example, some artistic expressions of the autistic community are still classified as art brut, a classification that was invented by medicine during the Nazi era in Germany. I know associations of families of autistic people who promote the idea that the autistic people have neither abstract thinking nor the ability to create metaphors, and this idea is a therapeutic bias. In my country, a lot of progress is being made in recognizing autism as an identity rather than a disorder. So, it is often associated with social disability, which makes it possible to claim for all the rights of autistic people, not only the right to health, all the rights. Ultimately, to ensure that autism advocacy efforts remain inclusive and culturally sensitive, I think it is necessary to recognize how autistic people's ways of communicating using plain language, pictograms, or easy reading are legitimate, just as it is necessary to recognize and legitimate the ways in which autistic people move their bodies and express themselves silently or just with sounds. There are many ways to participate in community and cultural life. Autistic people have our own ways of participating that may not be shared by non-autistic people, but should be recognized and respected. So, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Right up my street, Alan. I'm very much looking at the culture of neurominorities. There's a third culture that's not currently recognized. There's a third kind of mind, and there's a third kind of intelligence, and it's not recognized yet. So we gotta talk more about that. In fact, it seems that the military is one of the places where they recognize this the most and actually use us and want us to be part, so they're sure they cover all the different intelligences of human beings and artificial intelligence. So there's some interesting perspectives in that. So the next question is, if there was only the one policy change that you could implement globally to better align autism inclusion with the SDGs, what would it be and why?
Well, if I could implement one global policy change to better align autism inclusion with the UN SDGs, it would be the establishment of universal access to inclusive education and lifelong learning opportunities for autistic individuals. Now, this policy would directly support SDG 4, which is the quality education, while intersecting with other goals like SDG 3, which would be good health and well-being, and SDG 10, reduce inequalities. Now, inclusive education systems must be tailored to accommodate diverse learning needs, including non-speaking and high support needs individuals, by providing individualized support plans, trained educators, and accessible learning environments. This policy would also mandate the integration of assistive technologies such as AAC devices and sensory-friendly classrooms to ensure equitable participation. By prioritizing education, we empower autistic individuals to develop skills, achieve independence, and contribute meaningfully to society, breaking cycles of exclusion and poverty. This systemic shift would foster greater understanding, reduce stigma, and create a more inclusive world that aligns with the SDGs' core principle of leaving no one behind.
Minhaj, I really appreciate those words. So the next question for you, Kim.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, if there was one policy change I could implement globally to better align autism inclusion with the SDGs, it would be mandating the inclusion of autistic voices in policy development.
Yeah.
It would mean adhering to the global principle, nothing about us without us. This principle would require autistic individuals, their supportive families, and communities to be involved in decision-making processes when designing systems that impact people and places. Their representation is crucial for accepting and adopting policies that affect their lives and well-being, including areas where they live, learn, work, and play. So this global policy is essential for the sustainability of human rights because it focuses on how individuals are treated concerning their neurodiversity. Beyond human rights protection, including autistic voices in human capital formation for a sustainable world has the benefit of fostering a more inclusive society. Many individuals engaged in sustainability resonate with rich inner experiences linked to neurodiversity, notably autism. These individuals are often sensitive to the changes impacting people and the planet. They share a deep sense of responsibility toward their communities and the land, perspective that has long been expressed in the wisdom of Indigenous peoples. This approach to policy change for the inclusion of autistic voices centers around several SDGs, particularly SDG 3, good health and well-being, ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all, including autistic individuals at all ages. SDG 9, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation by tapping into the autistic and neurodistinct talent. Excluding and undervaluing the autistic voice ignores the essential role of cognitive and sensory diversity, which forms the basis for emotional intelligence and is crucial to human functioning and social cohesion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for all your insights and for telling the world about the insights that you have and you have seen and experienced. That's much appreciated.
To make society understand the importance of the more careful look at the Black population with disabilities, to inform, to debate in Broadway, to think about the public policies for the Black and autistic people like me. We are dignified and deserve support and access to rights.
Fund us, invite us to develop the projects that we need as neurodivergent people and wish we had growing up. Give us a platform for our voices and political participation. Nothing about us without us.
Have more autistic self-advocate and also back the need to listen to actually autistic people. The change needs to begin in the school system for non-speaking autistics to pursue education and contribute to society. Not speaking doesn't mean not thinking. Not expressing doesn't mean not feeling. Not talking doesn't mean not having anything to say.
One approach would be to focus on teaching neurotypical people how to interact with autistic adults.
One of the major things that needs to be done in ensuring that there's a lot of policy work is for people to listen to our voices. We as autistic people need to be at the center when it comes to advocacy that affects us, in line with the Human Rights Convention and also under the CRPD.
It is time for policy on autism diagnosis to be reassessed to reflect the actual needs of autistics, because autism is not just a word, it's not just a concept, It's who we are.
Go about advocacy in their own way. So whether that's like creating a TikTok that's relatable to them and then turns out to relate to a load of other autistic people, or whether it's like advocating for themselves and saying no to plans with friends in loud places. Like advocacy takes so many different shapes and forms. Like
when people think policy advocacy, they do think of like changing laws or changing the world or like changing it all right now. And I think for us, like, I think what can make the biggest impact for autistic people is like, how can we advocate for ourselves just in our own life right now?
People understood and supported the inclusion. That is the only thing where I learned about many things about inclusion, and it started sensitizing it. And peer sensitization should be there in every company when they hire any person with autistic, and give them peer sensitization. And
today, only a few hundred instructors, primarily located in North America, are trained to teach typing to 31 million non-speakers globally. In the coming months, Communication for All will launch C4A Academy, a program of internet-based instructional videos to teach typing to non-speakers anywhere, free of charge. Families will have the tools and support they need to learn how to be a communication partner for their non-speaking member. Lessons will demonstrate and explain each step in the process for a communication partner to coach a non-speaker to overcome their motor challenges.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on SDG 3, Good Health and Well-Being. I'm Hazleen Ahmed, your moderator for today's 40-minute session. We will be exploring how inclusive healthcare systems can better serve autistic individuals and promote mental health and well-being. This is a mixed neurotype panel with majority autistic individuals. Our panelists are Julio Eduardo Weiss, Rafael Asuaje, Andrea Palacios, Aaron Decker, Audrey Chard, Rob Holman, and Teresa Haskins. Please introduce yourself, including your name, country, and interest in autism. Let's begin with you, Julio.
Yes, my name is Julio Eduardo Weiss. I'm from Paraguay, in South America. What interests me about autism is my nephews. They all are affected somehow by autism. They were raised by my sister, but they spend a lot of time with me and my children, like I was the principal nurse when they were very young. Now they are grown up already. And as you know, here in Paraguay, our healthcare system really doesn't do much about this particular issue. In South America, it's very hard. We are still struggling by basic attention in our healthcare system.
Rafael?
Hello, everyone. I'm Rafael Asuaje. I am originally from Venezuela, but I live in Chile since 2018. My interest in autism is to better understand and support neurominority individuals, especially from my experiences in life. I was forced to leave my country due to economic and political reasons in 2017 to help my family, and I have to adapt to a new country, new cultures, and new ways of living to fit in. So that's my way to. I want to contribute in that way. I also believe in being inclusive, all of us as an entity around the world, and I also like to appreciate ways of thinking of people around all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. And Andrea?
Hello, I am Andrea Palacios from Panama. I'm a psychologist, and I'm very glad and happy to be here as part of this beautiful panel. So thank you very much for having me.
Erin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, thank you. My name is Erin Decker, and my pronouns are they, them. I am an autistic job coach and a researcher from Ontario, Canada. My main interest in autism stems from my personal experience in navigating the world as an autistic individual. This has driven my work in my master's and in my job coaching and future research studies to improve the lives of the autistic community and other people with disabilities in this moment and for future generations. My master's thesis focused on the heteronormative barriers to autism identification. And today I'm excited to share insights from both my lived experience as an autistic person and my research background in autism with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much. Moving on to Audrey, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey Chad, and I'm also in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm the founder of my outlet. It's a hub for neurodiversity, and we support individuals, families, and organizations with achieving better outcomes and inclusive environments. We do this by providing a variety of programs, mentorship and employment opportunities, education, workshops, and advisory tailored to the needs of our neurodiverse and neurotypical audience. You can find us online at channelmyoutlet.com. And the original interest that I personally had in the topic of neurodiversity stems from being from a neurodiverse household. There's 3 out of the 4 of us, and we've all individually had very different lived experiences and recognize that each one is unique. And we're very, very focused on supporting the community and, as I said, but achieving better outcomes for neurodiverse and neurotypical individuals by allowing the neurodiverse population to achieve their potential.
Thank you, Audrey. Rob, I'd like to hear from you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Holman. I'm the founder of the U.S. chapter of the Institute of Neurodiversity, which we call IONIS. And my interest stems from the fact that I have 2 neurodiverse children, and they stem from the fact that there's neurodiverse individuals on both my side of the family and my wife's side of the family. And I've developed education, and it's been a learning curve on how to work with the neurodiverse community, but also to help the neurodiverse community work with the neuronormative community.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Over to you, Teresa.
Thanks, Hasleen. Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Haskins from the United States, and I'm working with Rob and IONIS. My work focuses on neuroinclusion. I have worked with leaders to create environments where neurodistinctive individuals can thrive. I've spent my career advocating for systemic change, ensuring that autistic individuals not only have the support they need in education in the workplace, but they're also valued and respected. I'm a professor, I'm a speaker, I'm a consultant. I work with businesses and government agencies to try to bridge the gap between policy and practice, pushing for solutions that go beyond awareness to drive real change. My interest in autism is both professional and personal. I'm a neurodivergent parent to twice exceptional sons, and I'm really passionate about reshaping systems to try to make a more inclusive, accessible world for all of us.
Thank you so much, everyone. So let's begin this session with our first question. I'm going to open it up to Erin. Erin, what are the biggest challenges autistic individuals face in accessing healthcare services, and how can this be addressed?
Thank you for that. Autistic individuals face significant challenges in accessing healthcare, but also in the quality of care that they receive, if any. These challenges contribute to poor mental and physical health outcomes. And while there are many barriers, today I'd like to focus on 2 key issues. The first one is that many autistic individuals, particularly women and gender diverse people and people with other marginalized intersecting identities, are often not taken as seriously or maybe even disbelieved by healthcare providers when they're sharing their experiences. These communication differences and thinking differences tied with gender and neurotype biases can make it difficult for medical professionals to fully understand their concerns, which can lead to dismissal or misdiagnosis. To address this, healthcare providers can practice active listening and valuing autistic experiences and really listening to what that person has to say and try to understand their perspectives. Recognizing their own potential gender and neurotype biases to try to combat that in the meetings with patients, and ask targeted questions for clarity, and understanding autism-specific symptom descriptions and definitions, and conditions that may be very rare in the general population, but are much more likely to be experienced in the autistic group. The second thing I'd like to talk about today is access to gender-affirming care. Autistic individuals are 2 to 6 times more likely than the general population to identify as trans or gender diverse, yet they often face barriers to accessing this gender-affirming care. A common misconception is that autism impairs their ability to consent or to understand gender-related decisions, but this is not the case. The autistic community consistently advocates for their capacity to make an informed decision about their own care. To address this, healthcare providers can provide accessible gender-affirming care for autistic individuals without autism being a diagnosis that would remove them from accessing this care, respecting autistic people's capacity for consenting and self-understanding around their own gender, and incorporating autism and gender diversity intersectionality in training. By addressing these barriers that I've mentioned earlier, improving communication practices, and ensuring access to these care within these healthcare systems, we can make meaningful steps towards equitable and more inclusive care for autistic individuals.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Erin. Would you like to take this question, Julio?
Yes. As about in my region, the biggest problem is they are not recognized as autists. So it's very hard to say you are or you are not. So thereby, our healthcare system doesn't really have politics about this, on how to handle it. They through the fact that we have more urgent, let's say urgent things, they really don't give much importance to this particular issue.
Thank you.
So I would say this.
Are you there, Julio?
Education is the key for a better attention in this particular issue. So the problem is not that they are not willing to do it, they just don't know how to do it. And all the information, all the data they have is very, very old, In South America, we are very behind of new work techniques, let's say so. So information would be the key to give a better attention to the people.
Excellent. Dr. Teresa, what is your response to the question?
I completely agree with Erin. There's definitely an area to address with intersectionality of gender identity and autism. But when I was thinking of the question, I actually think that a larger, more holistic problem is that most healthcare providers aren't trained in autism. So this leads to misdiagnosis, dismissal, and fragmented care. And what I think makes things even worse is that the burden of navigating these systems, especially in the US, falls entirely on the autistic individual and their families. There is actually no structured pathway for care. And so most, especially adults, seeking diagnosis or support have to really figure this out on their own. The waits are really long, and this is often years after being misunderstood by the medical system. So the other piece that I see, and I think one of the most significant gaps, and I'm experienced this with my own family, is that mental health care is fragmented and needs aren't treated in a holistic, interconnected way. Psychiatrists focus on medication, therapists on talk therapy, and the overall wellness of the patient is ignored. So autistic individuals are left to piece together their own healthcare plan, to like interconnect their therapy with the psychiatrist. And that may not be an experience that's globally shared, but it's definitely an issue that we're facing. And that's really overwhelming for the patient because you're seeking professional guidance and often left to figure out your own program plan to create a holistic need. So in my perspective, we need a fully integrated, autism-informed approach to care, where professionals across the medical and therapy domains work together, not where autistic individuals are forced to do it alone.
Thank you. And I believe a personalized care as well is what is quite essential. How can healthcare professionals be better trained to understand and support autistic patients, particularly in mental health care? And Andrea?
Healthcare professional should be supported every year with all the information and innovative practice on how to support and be there as a support system for autistic individuals. How? By letting them know how the autistic condition is and how can we treat them with respect. I think one of the important things is to remember that no matter what, they are human beings. They have a character, and there is difficulty of them by be there in this world is that we don't have the patience to understand them. We don't have the patience to listen. We don't have the patience to create a better communication with them. And that's why we get anxious, we get stressed. We sometimes don't know what to do, only because we disconnect from this human part. So my advice is to remember that they're human, you are human, and we need to create a bridge between us and them, because we are already trained in our fields to support them. But because we don't know, and it's always on a spectrum, and it's always changing the movement, we disconnect from the daily and from the automatic pilot. But we need to come back. We need to breathe. We need to be in our center so we can give them what they need. So we can give the support they really want to have. So connect with your human side and remember they are also human beings. They are just trying to communicate and be a part of this beautiful community and world that we live in.
Thank you, Andrea. Go back to you, Erin.
Healthcare professionals can be better trained to support autistic patients, especially in the area of mental health care. And one of those areas of focus can be around understanding communication differences between neurotypes, the non-autistic and the autistic ways of thinking and communicating. Doctors and nurse practitioners and a lot of clinics often use a really fast-paced approach to understanding the issue and getting into a treatment plan. And some of these questions can be really broad, like, how are you feeling? And these types of questions for an autistic person may be a bit too broad to fully understand. So what I suggest instead is asking specific questions to bridge that gap. So, for example, I saw in your intake that you mentioned concerns about anxiety. Can you tell me specifically how that felt for you over the past 2 weeks? Instead of asking how we're feeling in general, where we could think about all the different feelings we had and all the different things that came up, instead we can really hone in on specific pieces. And there could be follow-ups about how it might have impacted work, school, socially, sleeping, feeding, all of these different aspects of our lives when we take this approach. This approach may take longer and may take adjustments to the systems that we have in place. Most consults are around 15 minutes, and we may need sometimes even double that time to get to the real heart of the issue when working with autistic patients. But through a targeted approach with asking specific questions and really taking the time to go through it with those individuals, we can develop formal autistic communication skills courses for healthcare practitioners to develop this better support system. in this kind of formal course, we can employ autistic individuals to create the curriculum and to conduct those training sessions, which can ensure autism-friendly communication skills are integrated into these healthcare settings. We can also train healthcare practitioners to use direct language and literal language and avoiding really vague or abstract kinds of questions, which can lead to confusion or not getting at the heart of the issue for that autistic person. And all of this kind of revolves around educating professionals on what it's like to bridge that communication. And throughout all of these different initiatives and approaches, I really encourage us to involve autistic people from the very beginning. And this kind of phrase, nothing about us without us, when we're developing these kinds of programs and policies, we're really looking to include autistic voices and perceptions along every step of the way to ensure that what we're doing to promote autistic inclusion within these healthcare practices are being created by autistic people for autistic people. Thank you.
That's fascinating. Thank you. That's in that way they feel that we feel that we're being heard and listened to. I would like to get the opinion of Andrea. What is your response to the question? Next, we're going to move on to question 3. I would like to ask Audrey, what role does early diagnosis play in promoting long-term well-being for autistic individuals, and how can we improve access to support?
Thank you, Hasleen. So I always say that information is power, and a diagnosis provides a framework with a wealth of information upon which to inform ourselves and to make good decisions. But neurodiverse individuals, their parents, and other stakeholders must be aware that a diagnosis is when all the hard work truly begins. This is when informed decisions can be made and resources can be sought after and communities and relationships can be formed. An early diagnosis is one piece of a very important puzzle that allows for the compounding effect of small changes. The book Atomic Habits by James Clear makes this point so extremely well. Small changes, which can even be indiscernible by those who know someone best, have the potential to make a big difference, positive or negative, over time. Identity formation starts at a very young age. So the earlier an individual learns about themselves and their surroundings, the more comfortable they'll feel in their shell and the more able they will be to advocate for themselves. And the more likely they will be to develop meaningful relationships and find community, which all contributes positively to good mental health. So in terms of how we can improve access to support, we need to educate the neurotypical population. We need to identify and engage with champions for neuroinclusion in all facets of our life, from teachers to CEOs to janitorial staff. This is a very personal topic. And so to find the people who are primed and ready to make change or are already doing so, and to support their efforts for a greater impact will go a very long way. In general, it's imperative that our systems become easier to navigate, as was touched on by my fellow panelists. We need better coordination by healthcare, education, and employment systems, and we need policy development at the government level desperately to coordinate these functions and see that care is provided and education, and that those opportunities are created. And one example that I would offer is when you look at teacher education and the percentage of teachers' college dedicated to learning about how to teach and support diverse learners, it's stiflingly low. In my jurisdiction, this percentage is close to 0, if not 0. And if it's optional for those who want to opt in to learn about it, chances are that those who have a personal stake in learning about this topic will take it, and those who are less informed will opt out or not seek it out. And so this is where It's not setting our education system up for success, and by extension, it is not setting up our employment systems for success either. So, to summarize, we need to improve access by continuously educating, by empowering and supporting champions of neuroinclusivity, and by improving regulation and policy.
Thank you, Audrey. Raphael, be interesting to hear your point of view on this question.
Thank you. Well, I agree with Audrey. I believe that early diagnosis is crucial because it allows autistic individuals to receive the right support and accommodation from a young age. When diagnosed early, individuals can access to different kind of therapies and interventions that help them to communicate, develop social skills to the world, and have sensory regulation. I believe also that leading to a better quality life, so they don't struggle a lot. Also, without an early diagnosis, many autistic individuals struggle with misunderstanding, like, for example, as Erin said, with different type of questions that are asked. Also, some challenges in school, for example, or work environments. So early identification also helps families to understand their child's needs and strengths, reducing all the frustration that comes without not understanding or not knowing how it's going on exactly. I also believe that to improve access to early diagnosis, healthcare systems all over the world needs to reduce the long wait times and provide affordable assessments and solutions, so many families don't struggle to get out properly diagnosed, and also having access to the right professionals and trained professionals around the world. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Raphael. Moving on to the next question, which I will direct to Rob. How can healthcare settings, such as hospitals and clinics, be adapted to accommodate sensory sensitivities and communication needs of autistic patients? Over to you, Rob.
Thank you. Well, I think the key word here is empathy. And to be empathetic to the patient, one must understand where the patient is coming from. And in order to do that, we need to know what the patient feels, thinks, hears, sees, feels not only emotionally, but physically as well. And in order to do that, you need to interview people who could be patients. And also, I think it's important to understand from an empathetic perspective how the patient may feel or experience their time at a hospital or a care facility by interviewing caregivers, doctors, nurses who are neurodiverse themselves. I know that they've conducted experiments where in order to understand the environment, a neuronormative doctor or nurse experiences a space where the light is brighter, the sound is louder, the colors are more extreme, and from doing that, they understand where the or how the patient could be experiencing that environment. And from there, we could probably realize that softer tones, color tones, softer, quieter experiences, less bright experiences would benefit the patient because of their heightened sense of awareness and sensitivity to sound and light and all that. So again, I think empathy is the key here.
I love that. Thank you so much, Rob, for that. What is your response to the question, Andrea?
I love this question because for me, is just make them be part of the redesign of the centers, of the redesign of the practice. And how we can do it? By asking them, by watching them. Just like a little bit of a scientific project. The thing that I do is to incorporate them in how can we change stuff for them to be better. Because we already have our training. We already know a little bit. We already know where to find it, how to find it. And we live in this beautiful era that with one only click, we can have a lot of information in different languages and just translate it and to be able to have a lot of resources. So to make it better in all these places that we live in, we need to include them. We need to make them part. We need to ask them, how can I make this better for you? How can I make this more clean? How can I make this more useful? How can I make this more satisfying? How can you be better and improve and learn from this? And how can I do it for you? So creating this bridge, creating this communication, making them be part of this, I think is the better solution ever. Because they have a beautiful insight all the time. They have the information that we need. And they are the population that we also work with. So make them part, ask them. Or if they cannot say anything or they are afraid and you have a great idea, just practice with them and watch them. And so you can know if it's something that is going to work or not. But make them part. And it's not only a creation that you do to feel good and to help. We need to make them part all the time because this is something that we do for them. And to make them part of stuff is wonderful because they also learn how to navigate in this chaotic world that we live in. So make them part. They have all the insight that we need.
Thank you, Andrea. Let's move on to question number 5. This is a really interesting question. What are some effective mental health support strategies for autistic individuals, particularly in managing stress, overwhelm, and anxiety? Very important question indeed. What is your response to the question, Julio?
Well, I would say the first thing is to make them feel that they are just going through a moment, not that, hey, you are different, you are this, you are that. You are somebody just like anybody else, but you have this little issue, and there, through that, you will make the stress go much lower. And then you have a series of different treatments. Like my nephews, they make echinotherapy, for instance. Like they were interacting with horses and nature and sing, and this brings the stress level really down. But if you are in a, let's say, in a hospital, in a clinic, in something connected to a lot of machinery, this might be very scientific, but it's not very, I don't know how you call it, your soul is not very psychological good. So you must find a point of equilibrium between the science and the heart. That's at least
Absolutely.
how I see it.
Well done. Yeah, well done. It's a good point. Over to you, Rafael.
Thank you. Well, I think that one of the most effective ways to support autistic individuals' mental health is by creating somehow structures and somehow predictable environments. Many autistic individuals, for sure, experience anxiety when faced like uncertainty or having like unclear routines. I know this from friends that experience that as autistic individuals. So like having structures and things like are predictable somehow for them can help them to reduce stress. Also, like as Rob mentioned, like sensory regulation. Like for example, having some sort of like soft noise, soft colors, and reducing like noise, like loud noise in the environment, or using noise canceling headphones can also help to provide some relief on sensory overload. Also creating like safe and quiet spaces where individuals with autism can like retreat, and when they feel overwhelmed, could be a potential and helpful tool and a strategy for them to reduce some things like anxiety and things like create a stress in different kind of ways. I believe also that traditional health treatments such as like talk therapy is not always as effective unless some people are adapted to that need. But therapists also should focus on like concrete structure questions and approaches, like to like for them to be understood and encourage that all those kind of like questions to professionals in the same field as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Raphael. Audrey, based on what you've shared, would you like to respond to the question and Raphael's insights?
Yes, thank you, Hasleen. And I wholeheartedly believe agree with Raphael's insights there. And I think what I would add is that it's so important to take care of your physical needs first. And it's easy to forget those things, but good nutrition, sleeping well, and exercising regularly are so foundational to allowing the gateway for everything else to follow in a positive direction. I think it's very important to find your community and support from those around you who understand you. And finding that one or two people who the autistic individual can trust and confide in for important issues is really valuable. It doesn't need to be a therapist, a teacher, or a parent. And that person doesn't have to have the answer to the question or the solution to a problem, but they need to be able to actively and patiently listen. They need to be able to help the individual reflect, and to the extent they're able to ask probing questions to help the autistic individual understand themselves and their needs better, along with those around them. It's important to have someone around them who avoids making any assumptions and who can ask simple questions like, what can I do to help? The individual themselves should be willing to experiment with different solutions to find the ones that work for them. For example, meditation and mindfulness practices may work wonders for some for some individuals, but not really inspire or work well for other individuals. So that ability to experiment is really important. And lastly, the individual should endeavor to be upfront and proactive about communicating their needs for support and what they need to get to successful outcomes. This may involve support from those around them who know the individuals best in terms of practicing and articulating what those needs are. This is particularly important in a workplace environment, but also in other settings like school and extracurricular activities. There's a lot of misinformation and assumptions out there, and it takes educating on the part of the neurodiverse community to allow those around us to better understand our needs. And at the end of the day, meeting basic human needs is fundamental to managing stress, overwhelm, and anxiety.
Thank you so much for that very thoughtful insights. We shall move on to question number 6. And I shall direct this question to you, Dr. Teresa. How can policy changes help create more autism-friendly healthcare systems? And what best practices have been seen in different parts of the world?
We need policies that really are going beyond awareness and actually are funding solutions. Some countries do have sensory-friendly hospitals, integrated mental health services, and multidisciplinary care covered by insurance or government programs. And even if these systems aren't perfect, they at least provide a path to diagnosis and support, because we're taking a world lens here. And being that I'm sitting in the US, I can tell you we don't have that. And not every country has that. In our country, insurance is tied to employment. So access depends on the quality of your job, not your medical needs. And it can also vary by region, but I do think other countries have that challenge as well, that care across regions and different provinces or wherever you are in the world could change. So sometimes families are moving from place to place to try to get better access to better providers. And one of the things that I think about where policy really could make a change is that there's really nowhere in the world where autistic-informed training is a universal requirement for all healthcare professionals. The only place that I can think of is the UK has introduced some mandatory autism training for some of their providers, but not all. And so when we think about that, when we think about that our healthcare professionals are not necessarily required to understand autism or other neurodivergencies, it's going to make sense why we continuously to see gaps in our mental health care systems. There are some best practices, or what I like to call promising practices, and that includes sensory-friendly ERs in Canada and the Netherlands. Go. That's great. And we had already talked about that earlier with bright lights and the impact of sounds that Rob walked us through. There's publicly funded autism assessments in Australia and parts of Europe, right? And like Raphael said, early diagnosis is important. So if you can have access to those assessments, it's going to be really important. And it could really significantly impact positively outcomes. And then just mental health services that are embedded in primary care, which is found in Sweden and Scotland. In many countries, mental health care and your standard physical health care are not embedded together. So you often have to find specialists to get that kind of support. So when we look at the countries that are embedding these policies and requirements in their healthcare systems, we're seeing how meaningful those supports are to the autism community. And it really helps get us on a better pathway to ensure people are receiving the help they need. And so these examples show progress, but they are exceptions. They're really not the rule, especially when we look around the world. The other thing that policy could help with, not to go on a tangent, but autistic burnout right now is not recognized as a legitimate medical issue. And it's actually, when we look at the research, its prevalence is becoming more. So because of that recognition, we're also seeing those individuals getting inadequate care. Because like Raphael said, oftentimes if you're hitting burnout, they'll take you to talk therapy, which may or may not be effective for you. So if we do not have policies implemented, it's clear that institutions are less likely to act. So in the end, if policy doesn't change, the system won't either.
Fascinating. And it's about knowledge exchange, isn't it? It's a setting like this that we are probably, heading that way. Rob, would you like to respond to Dr. Teresa?
Sure. I think a good example to look at internationally is the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And the reason why I think it's a good example because it's based on inclusion and it was created by those with disabilities, even though I object to the word disabilities. I come from an arts background, so I'm going to recommend a documentary entitled Crip Camp, like Cripple Camp. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's about a summer camp that was created in the 1950s with for children who had disabilities like polio and found themselves in wheelchairs or crutches or what have you. But I was surprised to find that those children from the 1960s, 1970s realized that they couldn't get up the stairs at their colleges and universities. And as was happening at the time, they had sit-ins, or as they call them, lay-ins. And that eventually created the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the the founder of that, young woman who actually passed away a couple of years ago, at age 65, was a strong proponent of that. And the reason why I mentioned that should be done is, again, we're talking about not only empathy, but inclusion. So including those, or having a seat at the table, if you will, for those who are neurodiverse is important. And I'd say the other word too is access. So in order to understand where the neurodiverse are coming from, of course, is to be empathetic to their quality of life and their situation in life. And after that is to allow them to be included in that. But it could only really happen from within, and that's why we have the Institute of Diversity, and that's why we have a global conference here now. So to advocate for them is to, and for us is to understand, and that's why we're doing this. It's coming from within as opposed to being told from the outside how it should be. And my humble prediction is the DSM is probably going to be outdated very soon. I don't know how it's going to continue as long as those who are at least from the neurodiverse arena, how it's going to continue on when neuronormative people are dictating how people should be treated.
Wow, what a way to wrap up this panel discussions with this very thought-provoking question and prediction. To all the panelists, I would love to hear from you. What one solution would you propose to improve the lives of autistic people? Julio, would you like to answer this question?
Well, at first, I wouldn't say they need to improve their life. As for my experience, they feel like their life is as complete as my life is. What we should do is just see them like our equals and let them see us as equals, just with a different point of view, because that's all about. It's just something, is a barrier that has been artificially mounted. I have never felt that much difference between my nephews and me, or between somebody that has a real severe autism problem and me. You just must erase the barriers that we create ourselves. That's how I think. I don't know if I'm right, but that's how I see it.
Thank you. Thank you, Julio. Let us begin with Raphael.
Thank you. Wrapping up like what everyone said, I think one of the biggest solutions could be to increase accessibility and accommodations in environments. My background is basically on UX, UI design and web design, and everything is based on experiences. And the world that we live on right now, it's more oriented to most likely major neurodiverse people that, for example, are not adapted to like the whole environment overall. So I will say like having sensory friendly spaces would be a one thing to have for all of us, like either neuro minorities, neuro majorities, as well as an entity. So, and that will goes from healthcare system, education, even things like a website to be accessible for everyone with different options to navigate. That will be a huge difference. And to utilize channels like this, for example, like this conference, to spread the words on the things to places where probably these things are not addressed like properly, could be as well helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. Something so simple yet so impactful. Over to you, Andrea.
Well, one solution that I can share is more for us than for them. It's for us to remember and be really mindful to help, to listen, and to understand and comprehend, so we can really help them. I don't see them as something that we need to handle, to fix, or something. It's just a different kind of connection in us as human that we really need to understand and we really need to accept. So treat them with respect. Remember, they have a heart and they have a spirit and they have a soul and they really want to connect with us because they don't really understand how to connect with them. So we have the key to empower them and to help them in a very beautiful way. So remember, we are humans and we all need love and to be listened and to find our place in this planet.
Erin, what about you?
Thank you. So mine is that these systems weren't designed with us in mind, autistic people. And so as we make changes towards adapting the world and all the different systems we're a part of to be more inclusive of autistic people, I encourage that every policy, inclusion effort, any kind of steps we make towards creating a more inclusive, accessible world for autistic people is upholding that principle I've mentioned earlier, nothing about us without us. It was also part of the documentary that was described earlier, Crip Camp. This idea that from within the disability rights movement, that our voices be central to the changes in these processes, ensuring that these policies are actually reflecting our needs and our lived experiences and will create futures that are collaborative together and that will work for autistic folks, non-autistic folks, in a more universally designed world where we can all successfully navigate it. So my end piece is do it with us, alongside us, together, and that our voices are critical to all the different steps that we take to make the world a more autism-friendly, accessible environment. Thank you.
How beautiful is that? United and strong voice. Over to you, Audrey.
Thank you, Hasleen. And I think my response is very complementary to Erin's as well. My call to action would be to challenge everyone watching today to take every opportunity they have and also to create new opportunities to actively listen and to seek to understand an autistic individual's perspective. Each perspective is different, colored by an individual lived experience. We can only improve the lives of autistic and other neurodiverse individuals by increasing societal awareness, understanding, and fluency in this area. Once we do that, as individuals, organizations, and societies, we can effectively make changes that will improve lives. And that starts with continuously listening to and enriching our understanding of the neurodiverse individual.
Brilliant. Rob, what is this? What is your one solution that you would propose to improve the lives of autistic people?
Well, it's two things really. One is to listen for the neuronormative community to listen to the neurodiverse community. And again, allowing them to speak for themselves. And the other really is to advocate for ourselves as well. It's hard to believe that only 40 years ago, 50 years ago, if a child was diagnosed as having autism, the pediatrician of all people would tell their parents to just have the child institutionalized and basically forgotten. That is over, and that has really stemmed from parents of those who were diagnosed as such saying, no, I'm not going to allow that to happen, and changing course and changing from within. We're still in new territory. I mean, this is only, for the past 40 years ago, where people are advocating for themselves, and their parents or family members are doing the same. But the changes have been profound and continue to be. I look forward to seeing what happens over the next 5, 10, 20 years for the neurodiverse community.
Such a poignant reminder. Thank you so much for that, Rob. Let's end with Dr. Teresa. What is your one solution that you would propose?
I don't know if it's a solution, but I do think it's a statement that people need to hear more. And it's that you are not alone in this, that there is support out there. And if you're having a hard time finding it, I'm looking at many faces on the screen that would be more than willing to help you. So one of the biggest hurdles I faced in my early journey, before I tried to understand myself, was to help my children. It was that I didn't feel the help was out there. Rob even mentioned, oftentimes you're finding out about this through your pediatrician, and it's a lot. They give a lot more problem statements than answers. And so it's not a solution, but I can tell you that one of the biggest challenges autistic individuals and their families face is finding the right resources and support. They're given a lot of resources and support. And I think my recommendation is, if it doesn't sit right with you, if it doesn't feel right, then it's probably not right for you. And the experts are well-intentioned, but they're not always the experts in your experience. And reaching out to those that might have lived experience and familiar issues, maybe to direct you better than the people with the degrees behind their names. And so I really think a key solution is increasing awareness to families and impacted individuals that the mental health and community is here to support you, but with the caveat that service isn't always equal. So you don't have to navigate this alone. And organizations like ION exist to help you find the resources you need, the community you may be lacking, and to create a collective voice so that we can help you advocate for the changes you need. I just really believe that if we can come together as a community, we can not just ensure that autistic individuals get better support, but we can really make sure that we can realize the outcomes we deserve.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And if it's not for ION and this recording, I wouldn't have met each and every one of you. So I really appreciate that. As we conclude this critical discussion on creating inclusive healthcare systems for autistic individuals, I'd like to express my gratitude to you, our esteemed panelists, for sharing your expertise, your insights, your personal experiences. It's clear that autistic individuals face unique challenges in accessing healthcare services, and that addressing these barriers is crucial for promoting mental health, well-being, and overall quality of life. Through this conversation, we've highlighted the need for comprehensive training for healthcare professionals, early diagnosis and support, sensory-friendly healthcare settings, and tailored mental health strategies, and a lot of empathy and kindness and listening. We've also emphasized the importance of policy changes and best practices that prioritize the needs and perspectives of autistic individuals. In the words of autistic advocate and researcher, Dr. Temple Grandin, the world needs all kinds of minds. So let us strive to create a healthcare system that values, includes, and empowers autistic individuals to thrive. Thank you again to our panelists and to our audience for your engagement and participation. As you said, together we can create a brighter future where autistic individuals receive the compassion, inclusive and supportive healthcare they deserve. Thank you so much.